And we're rolling. All right, welcome everybody. Today is May the 23rd, 2018, and this is the very first meeting for the cloud provider vSphere sub-project that is being sponsored by VMware SIG. We're just getting started doing some work. So SIG VMware is sponsoring this effort. We are a little behind everybody else in the process of extracting cloud providers from inside the Kubernetes repo, but we're trying to catch up and get to the point where everybody else is right now. So with that said, let me share my screen so we can look at a few things I have. Okay, and I'm gonna put a link in the chat with the notes for this meeting. So feel free to add your name to the list. If you don't have added access to the document, it's because you haven't signed up to the SIG VMware Google group. If that's the case, please sign up to the Google group. You just have to find the link that is actually in the link that you see here. Just follow that, just join the group, and you'll automatically be granted added access to this document, and as well as any other document that is shared by SIG VMware. So, just a very quick introduction. So my name is Fabio Raposelli. I'm one of the co-chair of the SIG VMware with Steve Wong. I'm not sure if Doug McEachran is joining us today, but Doug is another person from VMware who is actually be working on this effort going forward. I think he is actually commuting right now, so probably not be able to join. And we're, as I said previously, we're just getting started with this effort, so we don't have a lot to show today, but we set things in motion in the past, we'll say, since KubeCon Europe. And we started participating in the Cloud Provider Working Group, which has a weekly meeting that actually starts right after this meeting, so in about 30 minutes from now. The working group has been hard at work with amending this Kubernetes enhancement proposal that I'm sharing right now. So KEP number 2, Controller Manager, is actually being changed 16 days ago. So about right after KubeCon, there's a lot more information about what the repo is going to look like, what the process is, and there's a couple of other things that were updated because the original document was created a long time ago and it wasn't reflecting correctly what the changes have been in the Kubernetes code base since the document was created. This is still a work in progress, so there's a note here that says that the repository structure specifically is just a proposal, so it might change in the future. Specifically during 1.11 release cycle. It might slip into 1.12 as well. But I encourage you to take a look at this document because it's very important and it's very detailed in what the changes are actually reflecting from the code base. That said, we have another PR in the works, which is this one, which was basically my main tracker for all the things that we have to establish before we actually get started in writing code. First one being actually create a repository to host the vSphere Cloud Provider code. And this was, as you can see, was open about a week ago. And thankfully, it hasn't been merged yet. Hopefully it will be soon. But most importantly, part of this PR was to add a new sub-project here called Cloud Provider vSphere and a list of owners right now. Right now, you see that we have Kubernetes Cloud Provider vSphere. This repo was not there before. We actually got that created yesterday. So if you open up the repo here, you're going to find out that it's actually empty. And this is not by mistake. This is actually a thing that was done as if was done for all the other repos. So you see that there's 184 commits already, but the repo is empty. That's because it was basically a port over of all the Git history from the Kubernetes repo into this new Cloud Provider vSphere repo. So we have all the commits that happened during the history of the Cloud Provider vSphere when it was part of Kubernetes, and the very last commit was made by this person that was the one that created the repo, and it's basically emptying the repository and just leaving the owner's file. The owner's file lists all the people that are listed as approvers for the code in the Cloud Provider. We have engaged with these people. We're going to have a meeting with these people. We're going to report back the outcome of this meeting, where we're basically trying, because these people are not following closely what is going on with the transition from in-tree to out-of-tree. So we're going to have this meeting to better understand and better create a plan forward to move some of their approval responsibility over to the sub-project. And this is going to happen on Friday. So we're going to have an update on this situation for next week. Just want to point out that unlike the SIG-VMware meeting, which is bi-weekly, so it's every other week, this meeting for the sub-project is actually a weekly meeting. So it's 30 minutes every week. That said, there's another most important update, which is the proposal for the creation of an overarching SIG that will take care of dealing with all the cloud providers in vSphere. So Andrew SIG-VMware, which is a co-lead for the Cloud Provider Working Group, has put forward a proposal to the steering committee to create SIG Provider. This actually happened yesterday. This is the steering committee mailing list. So Andrew SIG-VMware, he proposed this. It's basically graduating the working group into a full-blown SIG. And he has a proposal and a charter for the SIG. This was shown to all the participants of the working group, and it was, there were a lot of comments back and forth. This document has been in the works for quite some time now. It reached a point where last week during the meeting, Andrew asked for any last-minute comment or some sort of seal of approval from the cloud provider, from the people that were representing the cloud provider for various vendors. And we reached a point where we marked that as complete, and it was then submitted for approval to steering committee. So hopefully, depending on the turnaround of the steering committee, we're going to see this SIG provider being created, I guess, a couple of weeks from now. So if you're interested in what is going on with SIG provider, which you should be, at least being informed about what is happening, I suggest you to read this document. I can put the link in the chat as well. So this is the SIG provider charter, and this is the proposal. SIG provider proposal. And what is this? How is this impacting the work we're starting to do right now here? Well, it doesn't impact anything right now. There will be a point in the future We're unsure when that will be, where there might be some consolidation effort happening. So the idea here is to converge all the sub-projects that are now being sponsored and hosted by the respective SIGs, like SIG AWS or SIG GCP, SIG OpenStack, and so on. All of them, including SIG-VMware, they now have a sub-project called Cloud Provider dash name of the cloud provider. So eventually, all these sub-projects will converge as sub-projects of SIG Provider. This is the long-term plan. We're not sure when that will actually happen, if that will happen at all. So for now, nothing changes for us. We keep going forward this way until there is a clear direction that says otherwise. And that's pretty much it for what I have as initial update for our sub-project. I will gladly take any questions or any topics for discussion at this moment. All right.
Is there anything you'd like help with?
So right now, I think the most important thing we might want to do is start looking at what OpenStack is doing. We're looking at OpenStack as kind of a role model at this point. OpenStack has been the first to actually deprecate the in-tree provider, the in-tree cloud provider. So starting in 1.11 GA, the in-tree cloud provider for OpenStack will have a note that says that it's deprecated and people should start using the external one. So they do have a repo, so cloud provider OpenStack, that is, well managed, and it's probably the gold standard right now when it comes to cloud providers. So we should start looking at what they have done so far, and I guess that it would be great to start and take a look at the outstanding issues that we have in the cloud provider that has to do with the cloud provider and issues that are currently hosted in Kubernetes. So if you look at Kubernetes in the issues, you're going to see we have a SIG-VMware tag. So most of the issues that have to do with a cloud provider are tagged with SIG-VMware. So take a look at the issues, and I will guess that at this point, the better way to start doing this is to just move and start wrapping the code. I actually have a document that I started to write some weeks ago. Let me see if I have it here. I can share it.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but the existing in-tree one basically has the volume provisioner. But if you look at the guidelines for what we're aspiring to in comparison to OpenStack, we're going to be picking up networking potentially, right? So would integration of NSXT be on the table for this cloud provider?
I think everything could be on the table for this cloud provider long term. Absolutely, yes. At this point, I will mostly focus on trying to extract the code and make sure that it works properly as an external cloud provider. Make sure that it's tested properly. And I'm not sure if all you guys know that we have another effort as part of SIG-VMware that is basically setting up a CI system for VMware on VMware systems. So we can test and run end-to-end and unit and integration testing on vSphere platforms and other VMware platforms as well. So ideally, what I want to have is this new repo, Cloud Provider vSphere, should be from the very beginning should be something that every code checking we do is going to be tested properly. It's going to be run through all the various hoops that we want to have. Going forward, because I want to avoid a situation where, just like the current cloud provider, the code is not being properly tested on the platform. It's just, being unit tested and so on. So right now, I think it's more like trying to better understand what it takes to have, a great working repo, and what are going to be the steps in getting there. I shared a document, which is the one I'm showing here. It's like a straw man for the things that we have to do. So initially, I just wanted to start by move the code out of tree, not necessarily removing code from Kubernetes, but more like having an implementation out of tree that can import packages from Kubernetes. So start with some sort of, let's call it the shim layer on top of the in-tree cloud provider, and then slowly start moving out code, and at the point where we're going to have a deprecated copy in the in tree that's going to be there for deprecated, still in tree but deprecated, and just not being managed anymore, and have a copy that sits out of the tree that's going to have all the fixes, and it's going to be the one that we're maintaining long term.
So I think, just for the sake of new arrivals who maybe haven't had time to look at the background, the projection here is that a big part of this is the dynamic volume provision, or the storage portion, that currently, those storage plugins are currently in tree in Kubernetes, and they're being kicked out in the form of being re-implemented as CSI volume drivers. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's likely to complete until fourth quarter. So as an interim means for the test crews of this vSphere cloud provider, I think that the plan will be to continue to support provisioning using the legacy non-CSI vSphere plugin. And then once we prove that works, we've got test cases, we'll take on CSI, which is a separate project, really. Those CSI drivers aren't even considered part of Kubernetes. But we don't want to tie ourselves from day one into the CSI thing, because it likely won't be finished and there's too many dependencies.
So let's just say that my my aspirational timeline for the cloud provider vSphere project is to have a working repo and maybe some very early commits in the 1.11 timeframe. And when it comes to 1.11, I'm saying 1.11 GA. So between now and when 1.11 goes GA, we're going to make sure that the repo is fine. We have CI in place, or at least a testing environment we can use to run testing. And then maybe some early commits, straightening out the situation for the approvers and so on. That will be my my goal for 1.11 GA. And from 1.12, when the development cycle for 1.12 starts, then we're going to start, working on the actual code and having a CCM implementation available in a way where ideally we're going to implement all the scaffolding that is required for CCM to work and have a Kubernetes code as an external provider, in a way where by 1.12 GA to have one-to-one feature parity between the in-tree cloud provider and the out-of-tree cloud provider. Once that is done, then we can start marking the in-tree as deprecated and start working exclusively on the out-of-tree. So by the time we get to end of year, which is going to be around the 1.13 timeframe, we're going to have the in-tree marked as deprecated, no longer being supported, and all the development efforts for Cloud Provider vSphere are going to be moved over to the separate repo. That's my aspirational plan. I think it's doable. I think it's a goal we can reach. It's probably not even that hard to get there, but the Kubernetes community as a whole is moving really fast, and not necessarily everybody is running in the same direction as we are. So I think it's something we can achieve, but we have to stay focused on actually achieving it. So we're gonna have an update on the CI situation tomorrow during the SIG-VMware call. So if you're interested in that, please attend. And yeah, that's pretty much all I have.
So if we would like to get as involved as we can be, to help as much as is helpful, it sounds to me like the first thing we should do is show up to this meeting tomorrow. There's nothing in between times that we ought to be, we can read the links that you've given us, but there's no work that you want from us right now.
Yeah, not right now. I mean, I think right now well, besides attending tomorrow and maybe getting up to speed with the CI situation, which is also being worked on as part of SIG-VMware. So it's if you guys want to help out right now, I think the CI situation might use some help. For the situation for Cloud Provider, I think we will have to wait the meeting on Friday where we get together with the current owners of the Cloud Provider code and lay down and lay out a situation where we can move forward and become the approvers, become the owners of the code while they retain some control over it. As we already have an agreement that they're not going to continue leading this thing when it moves out of 3. So I think
just so you know, there is the Kubernetes generic cloud provider working group meeting coming up in 7 minutes.
Yes, correct. That's another thing you guys may want to attend. It's probably going to be mostly focused on the SIG provider proposal, but it's probably very helpful to attend that.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Just to say a few words, which is maybe more the cloud provider generic. So it's Florian from Swisscom here. I'm not really participating. I'm more of a user. I'm just wondering, seeing the cloud provider currently, which is mostly on the storage side, is there any plan at some point to work together with what's happening with the cluster and machine, the cluster lifecycle SIG or stuff like this, where the cloud provider could be used to create all the machines and not only the storage? Is it something that will be of relevance at some point? Am I completely mistaken, which could be the case as well?
There's definitely something we're looking at. I don't think right now we're in a situation where we want to, we might end up spreading out too thin.
Sure.
Over too many things, but it's definitely something we're looking at. We're looking at that, and we're also looking at KubeADM, which might be something we contribute to as a cloud provider sub-project, or we might end up doing that as part of another effort, always part of SIG-VMware, but not necessarily directly tied to cloud provider vSphere.
I see. I understand. I thank you for the precisions. I did see on the cluster API that they're making a prototype with Terraform to deploy on vSphere, so I was wondering if there was something like this. Thank you.
Well, everything that has to do with vSphere and Terraform, there is a very nice plugin that is actually pretty nicely done. So if their effort involves having Terraform, we're sure that we have very good support for that already. So it's going to be much easier than starting with work from scratch.
Yep, thanks. Yeah, I just saw that a little bit earlier, and I was target implementation with vSphere, which I found interesting.
Cool. Any other questions? Otherwise, we might give you guys back 5 minutes or 4 minutes now, just in time to switch over to Cloud Provider Working Group.
Thanks a lot.
All right. I'll see you guys next week, same time.
Okay.
See you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. See you.
Bye.